This is a Wisconsin Sports Zone update.
Well, it's unclear if the Packers will get to see Jaire Alexander on the field again this season. That was the word from Coach Matt LaFleur yesterday about a star quarterback who hasn't played a full game in more than 2 months due to a knee injury.
I don't know. As soon as I know, I'll let you guys know. I do know that he's been dealing with swelling, and he doesn't feel right to go out there and play.
Alexander did not play in 4 of Green Bay's 5 losses, all of which came to Philadelphia, Minnesota, and Detroit. If the Packers are going to make a run in the playoffs, they're likely going to have to beat 1 or 2 of those teams.
Obviously, we've lost to 3 of the best teams in the league 5 times. That is frustrating because I think we've had opportunities in every one of those games to win the game, and we haven't done that. So that's why I have to answer these types of questions.
LaFleur and the Packers going to close out the regular season coming up on Sunday against the Bears at Lambeau Field. As for playoff seeding, the Packers will be the number 6 seed with a win and a Washington loss, and the number 7 seed if Washington wins. Kick on Sunday is at noon. Turning to the Badgers, they have promoted Jack Cooper to safeties coach. He was an assistant DB coach and senior analyst with the program before this.
Actor portrayal.
When I first looked into life insurance, I worried about the hassle. Then I found Better Life. Their simplified issue whole life coverage plans mean no medical exam. I found a plan that fit my budget, and now my final expenses are covered. Plus, I get Better Life member benefits at no extra cost. That's definitely better.
Better Life Insurance, where better means belonging. Call 888-488-4133. By Better Life Insurance Company. Terms and conditions apply. Member benefits are subject to change. Contact a licensed agent for details.
Well, the Bucs are back in action today, playing a rare weekday afternoon game down in Indy against the Pacers due to New Year's Eve. Milwaukee just 2-3 in its last 5 games, and the Wisconsin basketball team still on break. They could return to action on Friday against Iowa. With this Wisconsin Sports Zone Network update, I'm Zach Heil-Prin.
I don't think we were at our best, but that's a credit to them. I got to be better, and we got to get better, and we got to learn from this and try to move on and get some momentum here. We got the Bears coming in and try to finish this thing out the right way.
This is where Wisconsin gathers to talk sports. Packers, Brewers, Badgers, Bucks. The Wisco Sports Show is on the air. Now, here's your host, Grant Bills.
There's too much going on today. There's a Bucks game being played right now. You just heard Zach mention that in the update. There was a big Bama-Michigan game earlier. Did Michigan win? I don't know. I didn't see the end of that game. There's a lot going on today. And I'm like, why is there Bucks are playing? What is it, Martin Luther King? I know it's not Martin Luther King Day, but why is there a date? Oh, because it's New Year's Eve. But it's weird. New Year's Eve isn't. It is a holiday, but it's not. It's not a holiday where we're all home from work. Tomorrow would be the day. So I guess there will be more college football on tomorrow, and just a lot going on today. And I kept getting comments on the live stream on Twitter when I would tweet about this, when we talk about this. Guys, there's a game. We're trying to do the Bill Michaels show. We have very important, pressing Packers matters to discuss. The Bucks are playing. I'm going to throw the game on. I think it's nearing the end. I'm not going to have it on during the first segment. I'll probably throw it on after our first break. But I can't keep up with it all today. Trying to research and outline good Packers topics. I'm trying. Some lesser radio hosts would really mail it in. They'd really phone it in tonight. Not me. I am hard charging through the finish line before being off tomorrow. It's hard. There's a lot of live sports on today. I'm following almost none of it. It's the Wisco Sports Show. My name is Grant Bills. If you wanted live Bucks updates, I'm sorry. We're going to talk football tonight. Packers football. We're going to continue our discussions that we had last night. Man, it felt good to be back in the studio last night. It's very similar like going on vacation. You love being on vacation. You love visiting cool destinations, staying in a cool hotel, flying different places, road trip. That's fun, right? But by the end of it, you're like, I'm ready to be home. It's going to feel nice to be on my couch. It's going to feel nice to sleep in my bed. It's going to be nice to be home. That's what it felt last night to be back in studio. And a perfect night to be back in studio taking phone calls because it was just 24 hours removed from a big Packers-Vikings game. The Packers lost. There was a lot of strong reaction. So the fact that we're back in studio after being on the road last week, able to take your calls, it was great. Last night was a perfect show. I had a blast. So we're going to finish strong through tomorrow's holiday. Tomorrow I will be off. And I know some of you, I see Cone Roller's tweets. I do. He was given some flack the other day to hosts that do best of shows. Like we're just throwing some crap on the air. Now I do that sometimes. Tomorrow will not be the case. I have edited together some interviews and some of my favorite moments from the year. I'm not going to act like I've been saving things throughout the year because maybe if there was a producer, if we had a staff that worked on the show, I'd say bookmark things for the end of the year. But I did go back today because there were a couple of interviews that came to my mind and a couple segments came to mind. So tomorrow, some fun Brewers throwback segments from this last season, an interview from Radio Row at the Super Bowl that I loved. You're going to hear that tomorrow, and a moment from one of the live shows last week as well. So if you missed that, that will be tomorrow. I edited together with some New Year's Eve music. Tomorrow will be that'll be a legit. I'm not mailing it in tomorrow. I mail it in a lot, but I didn't mail it in tomorrow. So last night, or tonight, I should say, is going to be our last chance to talk for the week. If you want to join me to talk Packers, I have a topic. I have a question to present to you. So I'm hoping for some interaction here. I want to get your takes. 608-321-1670. Not yet. You haven't even heard me ask yet. So if I see the phone light up, I'm going to ignore it. And then in hour number 2, Jesse Temple is going to be here. He normally joins us on Wednesday to talk college football and to talk about the Badgers. But with tomorrow being the holiday, he was nice enough to do it today. So you'll hear that in the second hour at 5:30. 608-321-1670. Twitter at Wisco Grant. The live stream, YouTube, Facebook, Twitter at Wisco Grant. Lots of ways that you can interact with the show. I want to pose a question to you. And when you first hear this question, you might think, "Oh, Grant, that's real that's hack material. That's lazy radio." At first I'm like, this is kind of hackish. But I don't think this is. I think this is an important question that we should grapple with, that we should discuss tonight. I think it's important. The question for you Packers fans and my fellow owners, simply, has this season up to this point been a success? Oh, Grant, hold on. Wait a minute. Because they're 11-5. They're probably going to be 12-6. About to play the Bears. And who knows, maybe they rest some starters. I don't know how they handle this weekend's game. But if the Packers needed to win that game at home against the Bears next week, I feel pretty confident that they would. So spiritually, it feels like the Packers are about to complete a 12-5 season, okay? And yet, a lot of talk about how Matt LaFleur's not cutting the mustard. He doesn't have it in him in big games. He loses his composure. He's too emotional. He gets caught up complaining about calls. He goes for it on fourth down when he shouldn't. He kicks field goals when he shouldn't. Hilarious that both of those things can take place in the same game. I've also heard takes about how he's been too emotional. I also heard the team came out flat. I don't know how those two things coexist. These are all things that I'm hearing from Packers fans and Packers media this week. So a lot of complaints about how Matt LaFleur, he's not cutting the mustard. A lot of complaints about Jordan Love. He hasn't been good enough, especially with that contract. A lot of talk about the defense. Jair's not healthy again. How could they? Lucas Van Ness, what a bust. What a crummy draft pick. This defense doesn't have enough talent. And by God, Jeff Hafley's playing soft zone or he needs to blitz more. Whatever. All the things that football people say, football fans and football media say about this team. There's been a lot of complaints, a lot of nitpicking, and that's fine. That's what we do. I'm not poo-pooing the nitpicking. But I want to ask you, point blank, has this season up until this point been a success? And let's just, for the sake of the show today, for the sake of the conversation, for the sake of the topic, let's say they beat the Bears next weekend. They finish the year 12-5. Pretty good, right? Pretty excellent. If you would have told me before the year, or if I would have told you before the year, as we're getting ready for the Packers season, year 2 with Jordan Love, all this young burgeoning talent in a competitive division. They made the divisional round last year when no one expected him to do anything, especially how bad they looked in the first 2 months. To now all of a sudden, man, we love Matt LaFleur. Look at what he did with Jordan Love. We love Jordan Love. He figured it out the second half of the year. And by God, we might not have a number 1 wide receiver, but we got 5 of them we really like. And now Josh Jacobs is here and Xavier McKinney. Hey, man, they added here and they drafted here and all these things, right? All of this excitement. If I would have told you before the year, they're going to go 12-5 this season. I don't know about you, but I would have said, friggin' awesome. Freaking sweet. That's that awesome. Sign me up. I'd take it. I would take it. Because as we got closer to the year, especially as we didn't know who was going to be the backup quarterback, remember that? Training camp and preseason, who's going to be the backup quarterback? Who's going to be the kicker? I started to get a little nervous before the season. I'm like, man, is there too much hype? Remember those conversations? Is there too much hype around this Packers team? Kind of feels like, man, there's too much love for this Packers team. Maybe they're due for a sophomore slump. Maybe they're going to let us down. The expectations are so high. What if they deal with injuries? Or what if we deal with a Jordan Love sophomore slump, a regression from this team in year 2? That was kind of my concern going into the year, as excited as we were. It's like, well, man, but what if they only go 9-8? What if they really struggle against, the rest of the division? Because we thought the Bears were going to be good. Remember? Well, the Bears that'll be a tough team to beat. The Lions, we already know they're great. Now, I wasn't like super high in the Vikings. I don't think they were going to potentially go 15-2, but I didn't think the Vikings were going to win like 4 games. It's a well-run operation. That's a well-coached team. They got a lot of talent. So before the year, it's like, wow, are they gonna endure a sophomore slump? Are they gonna go 9-8? Is Jordan Love not gonna live up to the expectations this year? That maybe they suffer a lot of injuries and that, lets a lot of air out of the balloon this year. If you would have told me before the year, they're gonna go 12-5. Now, don't tell me who they beat. Don't tell me how they finished in the division. Don't tell me what seed they finished with. If you would have told me before the year, the Green Bay Packers in the 2024-2025 season are going to win 12 games, I'd say, God, yeah, yes. Sign me up. That sounds excellent. And then imagine this. If you would have told someone, if I would have told you or you would have told me before the year started, Jordan Love is going to get hurt. He's going to miss 2.5 games, and still the Packers are going to finish 12-5. I'd say, who's got it better than us? Who's got it better than us? We're going to go 12-5, even though Jordan Love's missing time. This team is going to be friggin' awesome. We would have thought of that as what an outstanding season. They're going to be going to the playoffs, and man, with 12 wins, how could you not feel great about their chances to make a run? Right? We would have thought, what an outstanding season we're about to watch unfold if you would have known the record before the year started. The problem is, maybe it's not a problem, but the thing is, let's just say that all of their losses have come against the Vikings and the Lions and the Eagles. So Matt LaFleur, you heard the portion of yesterday's press conference in Zach's update where he's like, we've lost to the 3 best teams in our conference 5 times. But they won their other 12 games. Does that make this season? Does that diminish a 12-5 record? Do you think, well, yeah, they went 12-5, but they didn't beat the best teams, but they didn't get a signature win or a great signature win. I thought the Seattle win at the time was pretty solid. I'm not acting like they went, into Arrowhead and beat Patrick Mahomes, but going to Seattle and winning with the authority with which they won, I'm like, yeah, that's pretty good. It's not going to Detroit. It's not going to Arrowhead, but that's pretty good. Right? They didn't beat the Vikings. They didn't beat the Lions. They didn't beat the Eagles for whatever that's worth in week 1. I know the Eagles are great, but that game seems so odd. I feel like we shouldn't even put it on the level on which we are putting the Vikings and the Lions. But include it. They're a team higher in the standings, and it makes this conversation easier, right? They're 0-5 against the Eagles, the Lions, and the Vikings. Do those losses, does that break down in their schedule and in their opponents? Does that make you think less of a 12-5 season? And I'm saying 12-5 because I think spiritually, if this team really needed to win next weekend, they could. Maybe they don't because they rest players. Or I don't know. Maybe they just blow it against the Bears. Not that it'll matter because the Commanders control their own destiny for seeding anyways. But because they've lost to the best teams, and the best teams, the good teams, consist all their losses. They make up all their losses. Do you look at a 12-5 season and say, yeah, but it's not what we hoped for? It's not really the successful season that we were imagining. It's not really the accomplishment that we wanted. I mentioned yesterday, like, what if they had lost to the Texans at home or the Jags on the road, but they win one of those games against Detroit, or they win one of those games against Minnesota? They could have. It's not like they were blown out by 40. It's not like, so the Pittsburgh Steelers are an interesting comp, right? Because the Steelers over the last couple of weeks, and I don't know who they played last week, and I can't remember, but they lost in succession, I believe, to the Eagles, the Chiefs, and the Ravens, or the Bills. They played 3 juggernauts in a row, and they were kind of beaten down by all of them. Those games weren't close, right? And everyone kind of looked at the Steelers, and I mentioned this on one of the shows last week. Everyone looked at the Steelers and like, nice season, good coaching job, good bounce back year from Russell Wilson on a new team, but not on the level, right? I mean, just so clearly and markedly beneath the best teams in the AFC and the Eagles, right? Their cross-state rival, another team that they played in this kind of this run that they've been on against excellent teams on their schedule the last couple of weeks. That's not been the case with the Packers. The Packers didn't get blasted by Detroit. They didn't get blasted by Minnesota. Now, the first game they got blasted by Minnesota early, but then they came back and it was a football game. They didn't have their doors blown off in any of these games. They probably should have beaten Philly. They probably could have or should have won one of those Detroit games, and they easily could have won one of those Minnesota games. So let's just say, for the sake of argument, they have the exact same record. They finished the year 12-5, but one of those losses, instead of the Vikings, is the Jags. And one of those wins, instead of the Jags, is against the Vikings or the Lions. Same record, by and large the same season, but a slight cosmetic difference. Does that make that much of a difference for you? I'm just trying to gauge how Packers fans feel about a season. It's probably going to end 12-5. And back to my original point, if you would have told me before the season the Packers were about to go 12-5, I would have said yes. There's no way that there's going to be an asterisk on that. There's no way that that's anything other than an overwhelming success and a season that's really, really gone well and gone according to plan. And yet, the Packers are 12-5 with a winnable, albeit meaningless game or partially meaningless game in Week 18. And I feel like a lot of Packers fans this week they're not writing obituaries, but maybe they are writing obituaries. People are being very declarative about how Jordan Love's not good enough or Matt LaFleur's not good enough. And I'm like, guys, they're 12-5 in a division that's loaded, in a conference that's got a lot of talented teams. Now, they got to play some teams from the AFC South, but they beat them without issue. They got to play teams from the NFC West, and the timing was kind of nice, the timing with which they played the Rams, but they had to go to Seattle and win. They played a healthy Arizona team at home. They just stuffed them in a locker, really from the opening jump from the first quarter on. Right now, they went to SoFi to beat the Rams. They didn't have their top weapons. They had Matthew Stafford. That's a well-coached team, and the defense made a play to win that game. I'm not trying to be Mr. Optimistic and sunshine and daisies, and I'm not trying to tell you, guys, don't worry. I know they didn't beat the Vikings. I know they didn't beat the Lions, but this team is still great because, of course, I would have liked to see them win a game against the Vikings or Lions. Of course. Absolutely. But, man, I tell you what, they're about to finish the season, spiritually at least, 12-6, and it feels like everybody's like, nah. It's just kind of a bummer. I don't think the Packers have been anything other than a resounding success in Jordan Love's second year. I think the division is better than we thought it would be. And to go back to a point that I was making a month or two ago, we're not really used to this. We're not Seahawks fans, right? We're not like, there's been years where the NFC East has been good, where the Cowboys and the Eagles, they've all kind of been at least competitive at the same time. The NFC North has never been an elite division with multiple great teams at once. So I would contend that the Packers have been great this year and everything really that we should have hoped for, especially considering Jordan Love was in and out of the lineup with injuries. I think it's the rest of the division that's just really good too. And I think we're struggling with that a little bit. I'm not telling you that the Packers should be Super Bowl favorites out of the NFC. That's not what I'm saying. But they're going to finish the season 12-6 for the purposes of this conversation, at least. And I just think if you would have told me that before the season, I would have said that is nothing but a resounding success and a nice step in the right direction after Jordan Love's first year at the helm. And I'm just not getting that sense from Packers fans. So I'm just going to ask you point blank, take this any direction you want. I'll take your calls after the break. 608-321-1670. Has this Packers season so far been a success? I'll get to your answers, your thoughts. 608-321-1670 next.
This is the Wisco Sports Show with Grant Bills on the Wisconsin Sports Zone Radio Network.
The Wisco Sports Show will resume in 3 minutes. The Wisco Sports Show will resume in 2 minutes. The Wisco Sports Show will resume in 1 minute. The Wisco Sports Show will resume in 30 seconds.
To Rob's question, with having to clean up a lot of things, it seems like it's kind of a recurring theme in these big games. Is there something that's just not coming to fruition like you practice for?
I love it how you guys only take like every game's a big game. This is a National Football League. There's a margin of error that is razor thin. And when you're playing good teams, you got to be better. And there was a handful of plays in that game. If they go the other way, then maybe you have a different outcome. But that's just the reality of our league. But every game's a big game. And every team is capable of beating another team. There's great examples each and every week. So, yeah, I mean, obviously, we've lost to three of the best teams in the league 5 times. And that is frustrating because I think we've had opportunities in every one of those games to win the game, and we haven't done that. So that's why I have to answer, these types of questions that are bothersome.
By the way, I don't think Matt LaFleur was saying that you reporters, you're bothering me. I just think he probably is annoyed that he's bothered that they haven't been able to beat one of these teams yet. And I really like that comment from Matt LaFleur. I played it a couple of times during last night's show because the older I get and the more football I watch, and I'd like to think I understand that. I'd like to think we all understand football better every year that we watch. I'd like to think that we come away each season thinking, I know a little bit more about football now than I did before the season started, right? Just like anything else in life. As we get older, we get a better grasp of something the more that we do it. And I just, the more and more I watch football, the more I buy into that. Yeah, it's really hard to win in this league. And in the Packers, they've made it look easy for a long time, for most of my life and long before I was born too. And they've had down stretches, but the way that they've showed up to begin all of these seasons, and it's like, man, 10 plus wins, that's kind of expected because it's easy. You have a good players and you have a good coach, but it's not that easy. It's hard to win. So I think the Packers deserve a lot of credit for, without fail this year, beating all of the lesser teams, being 12-5 and winning all of the games against the teams that they're really better than. They're better coached. They're more talented, right? Now they've come up short against the Vikings and the Lions and Eagles. That's not okay. And that's why I'm not just dismissing it away. Well, they're 12-5. Be happy. Well, no, I really would have liked for them to beat a couple of those teams at least once or twice. But my premise or what I am presenting to you today and what we can continue to discuss, man, if you'd have told me before the year the team's going to go, 12-5, and I think they're on their way to being 12-5, I would have said, awesome, resounding success. Their 5 losses have just happened to come against the teams in their division, but the NFC North is overwhelmingly the best division in football. I got a text here. Was it from Chris Inacio, I believe? Yes. Chris Inacio said, another thing, I think, he sent a couple of things, and I'll get back to your text, Chris, but before I get to the calls, I want to read this. People saying that they are not happy with a 12-5 season. Is it because the Vikings and Lions have a better record? If they were on top of the division at 12-5, people would be extremely happy. Yeah, Packers fans, be honest. If the Packers played in the South and they were 3 games better than all the other teams, same team, same quality of team, same issues, same strengths, same weaknesses, but they played in a division without 2 other elite teams, I don't know that we'd be saying a lot of the same things. And that's human nature. That's fair. I think the reaction that a lot of Packers, kind of the disdain or the frustration with Matt LaFleur and other members of this team who at times haven't been good enough. I'm not excusing it, but I think the reaction is largely because we're not used to the North being this good. It hasn't really happened a lot in the last 20 or 30 years. It's kind of new. So we're like, man, this team's great. This team's oh, wait, there just might be teams in our division that are just a little bit better. Bears fans, Vikings fans, Lions fans, they've had to deal with this constantly. Packers fans, this is uncharted water for us, at least recently. 608-321-1670. Let's go to the phones. Wisco Sports Show. Who's this?
Grant, how we doing?
I'm doing excellent, Vagabond John. How are you this evening? Happy New Year's Eve.
I'm doing great. Happy New Year's Eve.
Actually, I
all night long.
I just realized I've been playing with a pen and I've been leaking ink all over myself. Damn it. Play with another pen.
That's fun. I was eating a salad and thought I was biting into a crouton and it was chicken, and that's a really uncomfortable feeling because you expect the crunch and it just never comes.
Yeah.
Anyways, on to a bigger business. To the surprise of everybody, I'm going to disagree with you here wholeheartedly.
Sure.
A couple of things about this team. Number one, first of all, if you just ask any football fan, hey, your team's 12-5, are you happy? Like, they're going to say yes, right? We have a winning football team. So I think for Packer fans, I think we expected this year to have a winning football team, right? So just saying like, hey, your team's, you're 12-5. Are you happy with that, right? I think there's always going to be a little bit more under the hood. And I think for Packer fans right now,
it's not, by the way,
coming from.
I want you to continue. It's not just that they've had a winning season. They're not, 10-7, like the 12-5. They're not just a winning team. They're a very, very strong winning team. It's not like they're just slightly over 500, right? And my question, and I want you to continue, and I'm sorry I'm being a jerk to you right now. It's not, I'm not asking if you're happy. I'm asking if you consider the season a success. So those are two different things. Continue, though. You're on a roll. I'm sorry for interrupting you. I wish I hadn't.
I think the reason why I'm going to say it's a successful season with a huge asterisk.
Okay.
Is because it's successful when you look at Josh Jacobs. I don't think you could expect anything more from Josh Jacobs. It's successful when you look at Xavier McKinney. We've talked about him all season long. Edgerrin Cooper, Devon Bullard, couple newcomers, right? Where it's not successful is this receiving room that we heard podcasters, right? I'm still blocked on Twitter from Andy Herman for telling him that the receiving corps might not be elite, right? Malik Heath might not be a number one on other teams, was one of the takes that he and I probably would disagree on.
That's hyperbole to make your point. I don't know that anyone was. And to be fair, Malik Heath gets in there. He's kind of a dog. He makes a play or two, but he's not, to your point, yes, he's not like a player that would be starting on other teams probably.
And I think when the NFL playoff comes around, you see teams with stars who make plays. And I'm disappointed where I think this season is not a success, in which, I'm a Packer fan longer than 10 years, right? We've seen this before. You can have a really good team plateau and never get over the line. And we were so excited about the youth last year to see all of those returning players, while you have the energy from these newcomers elevating those individual positions, to see all these returning players clearly plateau. And Jordan Love, I don't know if I want to touch him because whether if he's better or not, I don't know.
Sure.
Right? He's been streaky kind of in both seasons so far.
And he had injury. The thing of the rhythm of this season, I'm not excusing away a bad performance here or there, but it's almost been difficult to track the progress or lack thereof he's made this season because he was in and out of the lineup twice, and that caused him to miss practice. So that's been weird too. But to my point, and I'm trying to spread a little optimism, they're 12-5, smiling through it all, right? Even without wins against other elite teams. So you're right about Jordan Love. Continue. You're cooking.
Yeah, I just think when you look at this receiving room, that's what I'm most disappointed in. When you look at the skill positions beyond Josh Jacobs, right?
That's fair.
When you look at Marshawn Lloyd, when you look at the draft picks in general this year, right? When you're thinking about where we were a year ago, looking ahead to this draft, oh man, we just got to add a couple of key pieces. Now, obviously on the defensive side, luckily a little bit in later rounds, we found a couple diamonds, right? But when you look at just adding a couple pieces to create a really dominant team that's going to compete for Super Bowls over the next 3 to 5 years, I'm not confident right now that we've seen the growth needed. Josh Jacobs, he's awesome this year. He doesn't have that many more years left, right? Xavier McKinney, he's going to hit that 30-year-old wall really quickly. Those aren't pieces for the long term. Those are supposed to be additions to a team that was already cooking. And instead, it feels like they came in and immediately just became the stars we were missing all along, rather than additions to an already star-filled team, if that makes sense. So for me, why I'm still looking at this team with a skeptical eye is because Jaden Reed, Christian Watson, Romeo Doubs, Dontavian Wicks, all those guys we drooled over all summer long, none of them elevated to a point that they deserve a really lucrative second contract. And that's going to be interesting in the offseason.
So that's
kind of where I'm at.
That's an interesting one. I don't know that I really agree. Okay, so that's a great call, Vagabond John, and I kept him on a little longer because we don't have loaded phone lines. And he was hitting at a lot of points that I didn't really have written down, or things that we should talk about that I wasn't prepared to talk about. So that's great. So I kept him on a little bit longer. Thank you for listening in Madison, Vagabond John. Happy New Year to you. I don't really agree. Like, well, Josh Jacobs, how many great years does he have left? I don't know. We said that about Derrick Henry like 2 years ago. You know what I mean? And Xavier McKinney's 26. So to say that he's gonna hit the 30-year-old wall, yeah, but it's not like he's spearing people with his head. He's a center fielder. He's only 26. So Xavier McKinney's pretty young, which is what I thought. I just wanted to Google to make sure. Xavier McKinney's my age, right? And I guess I'm 27. That doesn't mean anything. I'm 26. That's not making some point. It's not like I'm abnormally young, but he's not closing in on the wrong side of 30. The wide receiving core is that is a great point of discussion, right? For all of the things that we expected, or all the things that we were excited to see, or all the things that we were waiting for in this season. We couldn't wait for the season to start because we couldn't wait to see what we had in store watching Christian Watson or Dontavian Wicks, especially a guy who got a lot of hype in the offseason, Romeo Doubs, Jaden Reed. Now, I think Tucker Kraft has been, he hasn't turned into like the best tight end in football, but I don't really have any qualms with Tucker Kraft in year 2. I have not watched Tucker Kraft this year and been left wanting. It seems like every time he's gotten opportunities to make plays, he has made them. And I liked what he's had to say off the field. I like the role it would seem that he stepped into as a leader, and Mike Clemens and others, like all the Packers people that I've had on, Mike most notably, right? Because he joins us, throughout the week on all of our shows on our network, has said, yeah, Tucker Kraft is definitely, you aren't drawing an unfair conclusion. He's definitely stepped into a leadership role. So Tucker Kraft, I think we've gotten everything we wanted from him this year. I've not been left wanting. I don't know that Romeo Doubs has been the guy that I wanted to see him be. Jaden Reed, not to be that guy. I know Jaden Reed, you got to get him involved. You got to get him touches. I think he's dynamic. I think he's good. Drops a lot of passes. He drops a lot of passes. And that makes me nervous. Going into a playoff game when you're trying to possess the ball and you're trying to put together drives to win a game, it's like, I can't trust if that guy's going to squeeze a pass on a gotta have it 3rd down or a gotta have it 4th down, right? So I don't know that Jaden Reed has taken a huge step like maybe we were hoping this year. I think Watson, when he's been healthy and when he's gotten opportunities, he's been pretty darn good, but he hasn't taken the league by storm. He hasn't grabbed the number 1 wide receiving job by the horns like I kind of hoped or thought that maybe he could have. And I think that Vikings game on Sunday was a great example of the points that Vagabond John was making about the wide receiving core. It's like nobody's really stepped up to be a playmaking star. The Vikings, we knew Justin Jefferson was better. Like no one was arguing, no one reasonable. I think maybe that Bruce Irons dickbag on Twitter who was in my mentions the other day. So that guy annoys me. But he was saying Christian Watson has a higher ceiling than Justin Jefferson or something. I've seen him tweet dumb stuff like that. But no one reasonable was like, actually, Romeo Doubs and Christian Watson are better than Jefferson and Addison. No one was saying that. The idea was you had this depth, and all of these guys at any given time could step up and make plays. But no one did on Sunday. And no one has really been that guy against the Lions in either game either. Jalen Naylor did it on Sunday. Jalen Naylor did on Sunday what one guy in this Packers wide receiving room kind of has to do every week, where it's like, hey, opportunities are created for you. It's your turn to pop and have a big game. And no No one's really done that. So I still like all of these guys, but none of them have stepped into not forget the number one wide receiver label. Forget that. None of them have stepped into this role or become this player. I'm like, I trust that guy to make plays when plays need to be made. And Sunday's game against the Vikings was the perfect example of that, because there were plays all over the game that needed to be made and just nobody was there to make them, either side of the ball, but we're talking about offense right now. Let's take one more call, and then we'll go to break. I'm also watching the final minute of Bucs-Pacers. It looks like the Bucs are going to hold on. 608-321-1670, Wisco Sports Show. Who's this?
Oh, NBA basketball. Wow. Okay.
Well,
Tony from Texas.
They're playing right now. It's pertinent. I'm watching. We're talking Packers. I'm just saying I'm also keeping my eye on the game.
Of course, this season is a success. Just like my New Year's Eve is going to be a success. Grant, I'm going to Nobu. Got a hot date, having some fun.
Is that sushi?
This is my Super Bowl. Yeah, absolutely. You know what I'm talking about, Grant.
Well, it was a guess. It sounds Japanese. I'm not going to act like, I've been there countless times.
Little sushi.
Get the swordfish. I don't know. What do you get there?
Yeah, here you go. Well, I'm going to have a good night. I think the Packers have had a good season. If you'd have asked me before the year, I would have said 11-6. 12-5 is going to be their record.
I think so.
You look at this defense, so are we only focusing on the offense? What about this defense? I mean, Hafley's got a scheme that I think is going to work long term. We just got to get some more horses in there.
I think so too. I think Jeff Hafley, and I said this yesterday, I think his scheme has made sense. I have not looked at Jeff Hafley's defense and been like, I would have done something else. He's just a couple cards short of a winning hand, right? Like without Jair, he's limited. Without Rashawn Gary really being this game-wrecking pass rusher, whoever, Phil Van Ness, Enagbari, I don't mean to pick on Gary. Like, he doesn't really have a guy in the front. Like, he can wreck a game. I can trust him to make plays. I don't have to scheme it up for him, right? He can only attribute scheme help or extra bodies to so many different places. And with the defense, like, I guess, are you disappointed at any particular player this year? Is there someone who you're expecting more from? I was hoping to see a leap from Van Ness. I was hoping to get a little bit more from Rashawn Gary. We just haven't gotten it necessarily.
Well, you asked that same question before the season started. It was Van Ness and Gary, and they've both been underwhelming. But on the defensive side, and you talked about how you learn something every year you learn something new, and that's right. As a football fan, I'm learning, like, wow, you can brush a pass. I'm getting fooled on some of these blitzes or non-blitzes. I'm like, sometimes I think they're blitzing, they're not blitzing.
Yep.
So to me, when I'm just watching up as a fan and as a guy that kind of knows football, I think that's high-end stuff from the D coordinator. And then offensively, guys like, Vagabond mentioned Jacobs, but Tucker Kraft's legit Pro Bowler. You look at Tucker Kraft, you look at some of these guys in the O-line are developing the Pro Bowlers. You got a damn good future ahead of you, a great core for the next 2 to 3 years where you're going to contend. And you're absolutely right. If we were in the NFC South, people would be going, oh, wow, Packers are going to the Super Bowl. But the Vikings and the Lions are good, but competition brings out the best. And I think in the playoffs, how funny would it be if we knocked them both off?
Look, okay, so this is another thing. I brought this up to Bill and Tony. I got to run. Happy New Year's Eve. Enjoy your time at Nobu tonight. There's a comment on the live stream says, no way he can afford Nobu. I don't know. Tony strikes me as a high roller. I don't know. I'm not pocket watching Tony in Texas, but that's okay. I'll throw the comment on the screen. No way he can afford Nobu. Now I don't even remember what I was going to say. I'm distracted by Nobu. I just think before we go to break, there were lots of plays to be made on Sunday, especially on offense, and they weren't made. And I think that's where I'm left a little wanting by this team. I thought maybe some of these wide receivers would ascend more, and they haven't. They're just all really good. I don't know if there's great there. And on defense, much of the same. There were opportunities for the pass rushers to get to Darnold and get off the field. Couldn't do it. There's some good players, no great. And that's a really, really good recipe to have a great regular season, to win a lot of games, and to probably come up short in the playoffs. But to Tony's point, it would be really funny to end the Lions or the Vikings season, and then we can just say, yeah, nice regular season. It didn't matter. That'd be funny. I hope that happens. That'd be excellent. I would love to be able to talk trash like that. A couple minutes, we'll come back, continue the Wisco Sports Show next.
This is the Wisco Sports Show with Grant Bills on the Wisconsin Sports Zone Radio Network.
The Wisco Sports Show will resume in 5 minutes. The Wisco Sports Show will resume in 4 minutes. The Wisco Sports Show will resume in 3 minutes. The Wisco Sports Show will resume in 2 minutes. The Wisco Sports Show will resume in 1 minute. The Wisco Sports Show will resume in 30 seconds.
Wisco Sports Show, going to continue to talk Packers. The Bucks came down from 19 to come back and beat the Pacers, which is funny. Screw the Pacers. A bunch of frauds. Fast break merchants. Hospital wheelchair conference finals appearance. Also, the Citrus Bowl, the Cheez-It Citrus Bowl, is just unhinged. You have the South Carolina coach, like, needing to be held back Like as angry and as demonstrative as I've ever seen a college football coach or a pro football coach. And I know Matt LaFleur like raised his voice on Sunday afternoon at US Bank, which was just despicable for so many Packers fans. People see, get it under control. Compose yourself. It's an emotional sport. Every once in a while, people get fired up, but this is next level. And I'm trying to figure out, Bielema was taunting him with like a substitution sign. The bench is cleared. Like coming to mid, no one's throwing punches, but like the benches are coming out to midfield. It's pretty great. If college football bowls are now background entertainment, which is what some people were tweeting about today, then it's great background entertainment. I'll take it. And Brett Bielema is nothing if not funny. And I'm pulling for Illinois. Do we still pull for conferences in bowl season? I haven't thought about that in a couple of years. Do we still pull for our Big Ten brethren? Speaking of college sports, two things. Number one, Jesse Temple's going to join us in about an hour with the latest on Xavier Lucas. Just a weird situation with UW-Madison and what's going on there. The portal closed. The window closed and Wisconsin didn't release him. I didn't even know that's how it worked. So we'll get the latest what he knows and what's going on. Another college sports thing. So Kansas lost to West Virginia today. And AJ Storr played a couple minutes. He took one shot. I saw Evan Flood tweeting about it. But Badger enthusiast, Badger_season on Twitter, doing the Lord's work and compiling some screenshots of what some Kansas people were tweeting about AJ Storr. Now, I have nothing against AJ Storr. He is a symptom. Symptom, that sounds negative. Oh, he's a symptom. I have nothing personal against the guy. He is just a piece of the current machine that is college athletics. Hired gun going from school to school, chasing money. However many schools you can get to year to make your money. Like that's fine. I do, however, and I will take pleasure in reading some of these tweets. So thank you to Badger Enthusiast for compiling some of these for our enjoyment. I'll read these to you. This is from Dan Tracy, Kansas fan. Not anyone important. I'll just read the name too. The transfer portal isn't always a guarantee. AJ Storr looked like the piece who might elevate Kansas into a championship level team. And the fit has just not proven to be that great. 15 scoreless minutes today in a home loss to West Virginia. Here's another tweet. I've been holding this in for a bit now. This is from Desplash Harris Jr. I've been holding this for a bit now. AJ Storr has been awful this year. He is our worst player. Next tweet. This is from Sam Presti Owns Your Picks. I love these accounts. This is the least enjoyable Kansas basketball season I can remember. Get Hunter Dickinson, KJ Adams, and AJ Storr as far away from this program as possible. I mean, look, I'm with you on Hunter Dickinson. Get him off this planet. Shoot him into the sun. Forget off that team. Get him out of, I don't want him to exist. I'm not advocating violence, of course. Non-violently, if we could get rid of him somehow, I think that'd be great. Sam Bruce tweets, a tradition unlike any other. KU is already the most overrated team in college basketball, and AJ Storr is the biggest bust of the transfer portal. Well, bouncing around, getting more money. Wisconsin would have paid him too. This college football. I was talking to Zach yesterday, and I don't mean to represent Zach on a topic or in a place that he doesn't wish to be represented, but I was asking him about Xavier Lucas. He popped in here. He was in the office yesterday afternoon, and we were chatting a little bit. I said, what do you make of the Xavier Lucas situation, Zach? What's your take? It's because Zach's plugged in and he covers all this stuff real closely, and he can normally give me perspective and give me information that I don't have. And he was basically like, I'm just so over all of this. This is so dumb. No one knows anything because there are no guardrails. There are no outlines, right? Like in the NFL, everything's public because teams can only, assumedly because of a salary cap, offer so much money, and they're offered in contracts, and contracts are structured a certain way, and they're structured within confines that all teams need to follow, right? And they're using terms and language, and there's a lot of uniformity, so it's reported and it's talked about, and it doesn't need to be hush-hush. Why would it be? Everyone's playing the same game at the same level. It's just like, this is exhausting. This is so dumb, right? And Jesse didn't say it was exhausting or dumb because Jesse's stoic reporter presenting information, of course. That's why I love Jesse. But he, in very different words, kind of said the same thing. So I'm interested to play that conversation that I had with Jesse earlier today with you. That's coming up at 5:30. A Packers topic that we've been kicking around, and it's the name of the live stream if you're watching on YouTube or Facebook. Has this Packers season been a success? I'm not asking if you're happy with this season, That's a different thing. Vagabond John hinted at that a little bit. The example and why happiness or satisfaction with the season, why that came up is because at the beginning of the show, I said, look, if you would have told me before the year that they're going to go 12-5, which is the record that they're on their way to if they beat Chicago this weekend. And I think the only reason they wouldn't beat Chicago at home is if they pull some of their horses to rest in the second half, right? So they're going to go 12-5. And if you would have told me before the year they're going to go 12-5, I'd have been like, awesome. Great season. Everyone stayed healthy. They took another step in year 2. The free agents probably contributed on some level. And then if you would have told me they're going to go 12-5 and Jordan Love's going to miss 2.5 games, I thought, oh God, this coaching staff is dialed. And they must really be able to run the ball, and the wide receivers must have stepped up to play with whatever backup in the absence of Jordan Love, and the defense must have been good enough, right? Like, I don't know how you would have looked at a 12-5 record before the year and thought anything other than awesome, overwhelming success. Now, do you need to be happy with the Packers right now? That's another thing. I'm asking, do you think this season has been a success up until this point? 608-321-1670. And I know a lot of you people say, well, we got to see how it plays out in the playoffs. I know, of course. I'm not asking you that right now. Maybe we'll talk about that after a playoff game. You know, if they're able to win one, maybe they get bounced in the wild card round. If they're the 7 seed, they got to go to Philly. That would be difficult, right? That would be an uphill battle, certainly, that they would need to fight. Has this season been a success? Chris Inacio earlier said, I think this season has been a 90% success so far. They beat the teams they were supposed to. The last 10% I say wasn't a success is that they haven't been able to put a full game together on all 3 stages with the contender. A pelt on the wall, as you say. Yes, I would agree. I'd like a pelt on the wall. I think last year they lost to some lesser teams, especially early on in the year. But even once they got it turned on, they stubbed their toe against Tommy DeVito. They lost to Baker Mayfield in the Bucs. I'd contend that Baker Mayfield just played friggin' awesome in that game, and he was dialed, and sometimes your opponent does that, right? But last year, they also went in Detroit and won, and they beat the Chiefs at home. Like, they had some serious hardware. It's like we killed a couple of giants. This year, they've beaten all the teams that they've been supposed to beat, which I think is a sign of added maturity and added growth and attention to detail and focus on a week-by-week level, because last year they would lose to some bad teams. This year they've beaten all the bad teams, and I think they should get so much credit for not tripping up against the Jags or the Texans or a team like the Titans or the Colts. Like, they didn't stub their toe once against a team that they should have beaten this year. The Cardinals, another example. The Seahawks, an example, right? Games like that. The Saints. I know it seems so far-fetched with how bad the Saints looked, but it's the NFL. Like, any given Sunday. And any given Sunday has not been the case with this Packers team. Problem is they don't have a single pelt on the wall. Now, they haven't been blown out of the water in those games like the Steelers were in their last 3 or 4 games against contenders, but just feels like they're a tick below those other teams. So another thing I'm wondering is like, okay, well, what if they would have lost that Jags game, but they would have beaten the Vikings once or the Lions once? Same record, by and large, a really, really similar season, but with one change. Like, would we feel overwhelmingly better? Would we feel that different today? I don't think so, and I don't think that we necessarily should, right? These are just some of the things that I'm kicking around up in my head today. 608-321-1670 if you'd like to call, give your take on this. I would love to hear from you next. I'll get to some more of your texts and some comments on the live stream as well. Wisco Sports Show, hour number 1. We'll wrap it up next.
This is the Wisco Sports Show with Grant Bills on the Wisconsin Sports Zone Radio Network.
The Wisco Sports Show will resume in 3 minutes. The Wisco Sports Show will resume in 2 minutes. The Wisco Sports Show will resume in 1 minute. The Wisco Sports Show will resume in 30 seconds.
Yeah, I mean, it just all depends on how you're looking at it. But, as defensive linemen, as, guys that's pressuring, we definitely got to finish those plays, because those plays change games. But, we got to get them behind the sticks. He did a lot of, he did some great things, moving or breaking tackles or whatever the case may be. And just being it, whether it was an incomplete pass or completing some short, he did a good job of doing that.
That's Kenny Clark from his post-game press conference, his media availability on Sunday night in Minneapolis. And we played a couple of different interviews on Bill's show earlier today. We heard from Kenny Clark, and we heard from Xavier McKinney, and we heard from Josh Jacobs. And you know what the overwhelming sentiment was from Packers players after the game? There were plays out there for us to make. We just didn't make them. Which is what I was telling you yesterday. And I don't think Matt LaFleur was perfect. I don't think Jeff Hafley was perfect, although Jeff Hafley kind of did the thing all game that I would have done. Kind of coached it up and schemed it the way I would have schemed it. I thought Sunday was about players making plays. Vikings players made plays. Packers players didn't. And I think all of these takes, it's like, well, Matt LaFleur needs to compose himself. It's like, okay, football's an emotional game. Like Dan Campbell hoots and hollers. All these guys get fight. Like, I don't think that matters that much. Well, he needed to take the point. Okay. So let's just get it right, just so I have it correct. So the time that they kicked the field goal, they should have went for it. And then the time they went for it, they should have kicked a field goal. Okay, yep, same song and dance when talking about those decisions. Like, I just think it's about players. It's about players making plays. Packers players didn't make enough of it. And if we're evaluating the team, I think especially on the offensive side of the ball, I think there kind of in lies the problem for the year. And that's what Vagabond John was saying earlier. It's like, do the Packers have guys, young players who've ascended to these positions that are better than just young, exciting players, but star players who can rise up and meet the moment and make plays when plays absolutely need to be made to win games? Because we saw a lot of Vikings players make those plays on Sunday, and not a lot of Packers players make them. 3rd and 6, and a wide receiver's got to go up and get a ball and come down with a contested catch and tough coverage. Do you really trust Jaden Reed to do that? Or I don't right now. I don't trust a pass rusher to get home when they need to. We'll continue this discussion next. 2-minute updates. Jesse Temple coming up. A lot more of the Wisco Sports Show next.
This is a Wisconsin Sports Zone update.
Well, the Green Bay Packers were at U.S. Bank Stadium yesterday. Their comeback would fall short as they would lose to the Minnesota Vikings 27-25. The Packers are now 0-5 against the top teams in the NFC, being swept by the Vikings and the Lions, and also lost to the Eagles in Brazil Week 1. With the playoffs quickly approaching, head coach Matt LaFleur was asked if he believes his team can beat the likes of the Vikings or the Lions.
I think absolutely. I think there absolutely is a belief that we can win one of these games. We got to go do it, bottom line. And we got to earn the right to play these guys again. And it ain't going to be easy. It's going to be a tough road, but I think that's a challenge that we'll gladly accept.
Quarterback Jordan Love was also asked what separates them from the other contenders.
Not much. Not much. Just got to come out there and when we play these teams, it comes down to execution and making plays.
Up next for the Packers, they'll end the regular season as they host the Chicago Bears Sunday at noon.
ABC of Wisconsin is the largest apprenticeship program in the state, with more than 2,000 active apprentices in 12 different skilled trades. In the ABC apprenticeship program, you earn while you learn on the job, get paid to go to class, and graduate with a job in your craft, but without the huge college debt. Explore 12 different construction trades in one spot at buildyourcareerwi.org, or just search online for ABC of Wisconsin.
Veteran left-hander Wade Miley is recovering from a Tommy John surgery that he underwent last May. Currently a free agent, Miley said he wants to remain on the mound as a big league starter for the Milwaukee Brewers, who just declined their team option on him. To the Bucks, they sit 6th in the Eastern Conference with a record of 16-14. They'll get back on the court tomorrow as they're in Indiana to face the Pacers for a 2:00 tip. And finally, Wisconsin basketball still on winter break. They'll take on Iowa this Friday at the Kohl Center. For the Wisconsin Sports Zone Network, I'm Ebo.
I don't think we were at our best, but that's a credit to them. I got to be better, and we got to get better, and we got to learn from this and try to move on and get some momentum here. We got the Bears coming in and try to finish this thing out the right way.
This is where Wisconsin gathers to talk sports. Packers, Brewers, Badgers, Bucks. The Wisco Sports Show is on the air. Now, here's your host, Grant Bills.
I keep watching this play of Brett Bielema taunting Shane Beamer, and then Shane Beamer being held back by 3 coaches. He's trying to push through these guys. No, let me at him. Just one time in sports, I want the holdback guys to just let the coach go. Just let him go and see what the coach actually does. What are you going to go do? Are you going to go fight Brett Bielema? It's just theatrics. Yo, hold me back. You know what, coach? Go ahead. Go do what you're going to do. It's like the cat that needs to let me outside. And then as soon as you open the door, the cat's like, well, actually, I don't really want to go out there. Shane Beamer, what are you going to do? You're going to run across the field and fight Brett Bielema? It's one of these times I want for the hold me back guys to just let the coach go and see what happens. I don't think anything will happen. That's my point. So this Cheez-It Citrus Bowl, Illinois is up. I want Illinois to win. Screw South Carolina. Screw the SEC. I'm pulling for Bielema. And for all the Badger people on Twitter who are like, oh, it's classic Bielema. You know what? That little sequence is more fun than anything I've watched for Badger football under Luke Fickell. And I'm not saying Luke Fickell needs to drum up more sideline antics. That's not what I'm saying. But I'd kill to be in this game. I'd kill for Luke Fickell and another coach to be going back and forth and for the team to be scratching and clawing for a bowl that's sponsored by Cheez-Its. I miss those days. We used to do that. I remember as a Badger football fan, we had good players once upon a time too. It's the Wisco Sports Show. Speaking of Badgers football, Jesse Temple going to join us in about a half hour for his weekly stop. Until then, we're going to continue talking Packers. Unless you want to discuss something else, I'm wide open. It's the last day of the year. Anything is on the table. So 608-321-1670. This caller's been waiting a couple minutes. I don't want to make him wait any longer. Wisco Sports Show. Who's this?
This is Eric.
Who?
Eric, I'm a first-time caller.
Oh,
I've never
Eric.
called a radio show.
Eric, you're good, Eric. I just didn't hear you the first time. What's going on, man?
So you asked if this season is a success, right?
Yep.
So the way that we ended last year, we were all riding high.
Mm-hmm.
Now this year, if I told you we were going to finish 3rd in the division, Love was going to look worse, but our defense was better. Is that success? Because we didn't improve our playoff seeding.
Yeah, but they're going to win. I assume, and I'm kind of counting this Bears game as a win because I think if they lose, it'll be because they don't play their guys. They're going to win, 4 more games than they won last year? 3 more games? The playoff seeding is more of a, that's more impacted by the other teams in the conference. It's not like the Packers are going to win 3 more games. You know what I mean?
Right, but now what about finishing third in the division?
Again, I also think that's a product of the division getting better. Now, the Packers last year they won games in the division. This year they didn't, but I think both the Vikings and the Lions also got better this year. You know what I mean?
That's fair. That's fair.
I'm just trying to be fair. I'm not trying to talk down to Packers fans and be like, no, this team is good and you should be excited and thankful because they've left me wanting in games against the Lions and the Vikings. But I don't know. They're going to win 3 more games this year than they did last year. And if you would have told me that they were going to go 12-5 before the year, I'd say, awesome, sign me up. It's just this division is loaded, and it's not something Eric, as Packers fans, we're used to. We're not used to the NFC North being like this.
This is true. Now, next year, if we finish, not next year, I'm sorry, this year, if we're bounced in the first round of the playoffs,
sure,
would that be okay?
Well, no. Okay, well, that's another thing. Like, that's kind of why I'm asking here. Like, before the playoff starts, let's just talk about the season as a whole. I don't know. If they go to Philly and lose a field goal game, a back and forth battle, like I don't know. I don't know how I will react to that. I think I'll need to see it. I will need to see, you know what I mean? Like, I'm going to need to see it and watch it and feel it before I can really tell you how I'll feel about that.
Okay. No, because I'm just afraid that if we go there and we get blown out, I didn't see enough improvement to make me be like, yay, successful, you know?
Sure. No, if they get blown out, I feel pretty confident in saying that I will be unhappy with that. And if they lose, I'm not going to be happy with it. I don't know. I think they got an opportunity last year to sneak up on a Cowboys team, and they absolutely took advantage of it. And then they blew an opportunity against the Niners, I thought. This year, it's like the NFC's better. I think the Lions, the Vikings, the Eagles are all better teams this year than the Niners were last year, to be honest.
Okay. Well, thank you for your time.
No, thank you, Eric. That was a very agreeable phone call. I was like, that's a good point. And then I would say something, and Eric would be like, well, that's a good point. Wow. A little too agreeable. Let's take another call. I need like a Dave from Monona take or something. Kick me in the side of the head. Wisco Sports Show. Who's this?
This is Augie in Altoona.
Augie, what's going on, Augie? Go Rails.
I'm kind of on the Cricket side of the rivalry.
Oh, I see. I'm a Crickets fan as well.
No, when you look at the NFC here, and this isn't a bash Matt LaFleur call. The people who don't believe in LaFleur are kind of don't know what it means to have a bad head coach. He's a good head coach. But when I look at, it's an old cliche that the team takes on the personality of its coach, and I'm not really into cliches very much, but you look at the Lions, ultra aggressive, don't really care, don't have to answer to anybody. We're just going to go out here and ball out. You look at the Vikings, very similar to Dan Campbell. You look at the Vikings, smart, precise, kind of intellectually good football, talented. I see Kevin O'Connell. The Eagles, kind of like Sirianni, they're kind of goofy, but somehow they make it work.
Very
don't know
brash.
how, but
They almost fit Philadelphia. Like they almost take on the personality of what a Philly sports team should be.
Right. And when I see the Packers, they're very talented. They're good. I kind of, Matt LaFleur is kind of exuding kind of a tightness to me. You see him on the sidelines there. It's kind of like Harbaugh in the Super Bowl. Like, yeah, they blew that offsides call. Guess what? The officials, they do blow calls. I don't think officiating is at a real good place right now. So you can either try to fight it and kind of be kind of whiny about it, or you can move on and say, you know what? They're trying to screw us. Let's go take it. It just seems like last year, the Packers were kind of playing with house money a little bit. Beating the Chiefs, beating the Lions kind of unexpectedly. Then you go to Dallas as big underdogs and just blow the doors off them. They seem to be operating kind of in a different mentality. And this year, when they're expected to be pretty good, it seems like there's kind of a tightness and worried about every call and this and that. I kind of get a kind of a Kyle Shanahan kind of vibe where they're good coaches, good plans.
Good comp.
Like just let the game play out. You're better. You've got a good offensive plan. You got a good scheme. Just go play. And that's kind of what I wish that they would come down to. I don't think the Packers are not winning these 5 big games because they're considerably less talented. All those teams are good. I would have thought they would have won at least 1 or 2. But it kind of comes down to me. Just kind of let it fly here.
So maybe a potential matchup if they have to go to, thank you, Augie. Thanks for listening in Altoona. If they have to go to Philly, or if they have to go again to Detroit or Minnesota, that's looking like Probably not in the first round because Detroit or Minnesota's going to have the bye. But let's say they go to Philly in round 2. Maybe a matchup in Philadelphia brings out the absolute best in Green Bay. And by the best, I mean kind of what Augie was hinting at. Like, just play free, play loose. You're a good team. You're talented. Just let it fly. Just go out there and rip it. Maybe a trip to Philly. Maybe that's the environment. Maybe that's the matchup that brings that version of the Packers out. Like, man, don't worry about it. No one expects us to win this game. We're going on the road with a 7 seed. Just go out there and rip it. And I think that's when this team plays their best. But I think fans, right? We change our personality. We change our approach to things when expectations change. I bet players do too, right? I don't know that Packers players were crushed by losses last year because it's like, well, we're figuring it out kind of in year 1. And I don't know that this year the wins against bad teams and the losses, the perspective changes. And this team last year made their bones when it's like, we can play underdog, we can get hot, we can just go out and rip it and not worry about the consequences. Well, when there are expectations, there are consequences. And maybe that's part of it. I don't know. It's not something that I've thought about until now, but maybe that's something that's worth exploring over the next, week or two through the Bears game and then into the first round of the playoffs, wherever they end up going. 608-321-1670, Wisco Sports Show. Who's this?
Hey, Ryan here.
Hey, what's going on,
How
Ryan?
we doing?
I'm doing excellent, Ryan. How about you?
I'm doing wonderful. New Year's Eve, so it's a good one. But I like what you said. Now, my thought process actually on the losses compared from last year to this year, I bet you the losses this year sting more, even though they're half.
Sure.
Right?
Yep.
The second thing I wanted to say, and this is just kind of a hypothesis of mine. You know how head coach Matt LaFleur has been going for, I want a perfect game. I want a perfect 4 quarters. Did you notice last week at New Orleans how they never let up in the 4th quarter? And so I'm thinking they got through their perfect game last week, and this week was a little bit of a hangover week in my mind.
Okay.
Now, Vikings are a very good team. One of the best teams we've played against the Vikings, but that's just a hypothesis of mine.
Okay. So the 4th quarter, New Orleans hangover. I don't know. It was a Monday night game. They're playing on a short week too, which makes a difference, Ryan. I appreciate the call. I don't know. So Ryan was kind of building off of something that I was just saying. Let's talk about that idea. The idea that even though they've lost half of the games this year that they've lost last year, right? Those losses hurt more because, again, when there are more expectations, like as fans, we know this. When our team is expected to win a lot of games, the wins don't feel as good and the losses hurt a lot more. Last year, it was probably a little bit easier for this team to not flush losses because losses always hurt. These guys are pros. Right? It's not, well, that team's rebuilding. Okay, we'll tell that to the 53 guys on the roster who are trying to win games on Sundays, right? But for a team, they're trying to figure it out, and they're in year number 1, losses aren't so backbreaking, and wins are just, you could just roll one win into the next. Whereas when the Packers beat a team like the Saints, they beat it, last year's team, they would have really, that really would have meant something to them. This year, it's like, all right, that's a check on a spreadsheet. Okay, now let's focus on the Vikings, right? The losses don't mean quite as much. The wins mean a little bit less. And I think maybe this team in year number 2 is adjusting to expectations and adjusting to a different reality the same way fans are, where it's like, man, we're going to win 12 games. And it feels like a lot of fans believe that the team is taking a step back from last year. 608-321-1670, another call. Wisco Sports Show. Who's this?
Hey, it's Uncle Packer. How's
Uncle
your day
Packer
going?
I'm doing great. Have you resumed, or I guess, have you ended your travels? Are you back home?
Yeah, I made it back home safe. It was a wonderful trip.
How was it? You went to DC, and then where was the other spot that you went?
Tampa Bay.
Tampa. I was going to say Florida. Okay. Well, cool.
Yeah.
Well, welcome back. Happy
Yeah.
New Year's Eve. What did you make? We haven't talked since the Vikings game on Sunday.
It's in my storybook ending of the Packers season, I want us to go in kind of on, I think people are going to be scared of us, but I want us to go in a little bit like an underdog.
Sure.
I know the Vikings are a good team. I really agree with the last caller, what he said. The Vikings are a real good team. And maybe I don't believe in a hangover. I don't want to make excuses, but I just want to get into the playoffs healthy. And I'm not banging on LaFleur for being, he's been so excitable lately, but if you ever watch a pro basketball game or a pro baseball game, those guys are just like that all the time.
Yeah, a lot of coaches are. Well, Kevin O'Connell kept his cool. Well, did his team get boned on a call that he thought was really egregious and led to points? Like I don't know. Kevin O'Connell's now the gold standard for how a coach is supposed to behave. They all behave differently in different moments in different games on different weeks. Like, I don't know. Body language matters, but I think we've jumped the shark this week.
Yeah, that offensive lineman that used to play for us said that he was I can't remember his name.
Tauscher?
I should. Tauscher, that what he said was just abnormal, wrong. I just don't agree with it at all. And I think he's got to be out. I like him going for it on fourth down. I like him being excitable. I like the want to win. If he was just standing there, I'd be a lot more worried about it. I don't think he causes anything, but I agree. The way the team reacts has got to be what he controls. If they're not ready, that's on him. So if they're excitable for one game and not the next, that's on the coach.
That's a coaching thing that I was really zeroed in on, Uncle Packer. And I don't know if you had a chance to listen last week while you're traveling. I hope you weren't. You were with your kids. But on Friday, I said that the thing that I watch for with this team at the beginning of the game, are they blocking along the offensive line? Are they crisp? Are they dialed in? Are they executing? Does it seem like they showed up ready to go? And they did. The problem is it just didn't convert to points early on. They had to settle for a field goal, and then Jaden Reed dropped that ball on fourth down. Like, I thought they showed up ready to go. Now, I don't know that Matt LaFleur made great adjustments over the course of the game, but the number one thing is they showed up ready to go. They just didn't make enough plays. And I don't necessarily put that on LaFleur, even though he was like throwing his helmet and raising his voice. Like these are adults competing at a really high level. The players can't handle an emotional coach. I just don't buy into that.
Yeah, me neither. I'm thinking that they were just, I like that he gets excited. I like the way that the guy gets excited for the Lions. I like that kind of thought where my coach is going to be excited and try to win.
I like that as well. We had Rob Reichelon earlier today. And I like Rob, Uncle Packer. I appreciate it. And I like Rob. He's more critical of LaFleur than most. And a lot of people are just like with his demeanor on Sunday. And I just don't look. If there's a bad call, I think any coach is going to be fired up about it. I think Kevin O'Connell probably would have done something very similar. Maybe he does it a little differently, but Kevin O'Connell, he's mature. He would have patted the ref on the ass and said, "We all miss him. It's okay." Like, no, he wouldn't. He would have been upset too. All these coaches are fiery. Like, do you think Kevin O'Connell, even in his most frustrated, is like, "Well, I must remain stoic because my players are watching"? Like, no, these are football coaches. They get fired up. So I think body language matters, but Jesus, not to the extent that some people are saying with Matt LaFleur. I just think it's way over the top. There were plays that needed to be made. Players didn't make them. I think it was that simple. And I can find more evidence to show you. I know that we didn't kind of set out on tonight's show to talk about Matt LaFleur, and that's just kind of where we've ended up over these last 10 or 15 minutes, but that's fine. It's the last show of the year, so anything that you want to get off your chest, last chance to chat before next year. And I will be off tomorrow, so we won't be able to talk again until Thursday. 608-321-1670. We will be back 3 minutes. I'm dialed in on the end of the Cheez-It Citrus Bowl. This is a good game, so I'm going to watch that for a couple minutes. We'll be right back.
This is the Wisco Sports Show with Grant Bills on the Wisconsin Sports Zone Radio Network.
The Wisco Sports Show will resume in 3 minutes. The Wisco Sports Show will resume in 2 minutes. The Wisco Sports Show will resume in 1 minute. The Wisco Sports Show will resume in 30 seconds.
Man, it was just, honestly, I don't know how much it changed. I think we had a lot of plays out there that we kind of just missed on, as a team. Whether it's, not converting on third downs, fourth down, whatever. So, yeah, it was just one of them days.
Lots of plays to be made, just didn't make them. Vikings made a lot of plays. That was the difference on Sunday. Save me the histrionics. I don't even think I used that correctly. Let me back up. Save me the dramatic takes about Matt LaFleur's body language. I don't care. He needs to keep his composure. Look at Kevin O'Connell. Yeah, well, Kevin O'Connell's team was winning. And Kevin O'Connell didn't feel like he was boned on a call that played a serious role in the game. And I haven't really complained about that. Look, officials miss calls. But I'm not going to sit here and be like, well, LaFleur should just deal with it like a man. Pat the official on the ass and move on. It's okay. We all miss calls. No coach would do that. Any coach that feels like a bad call really hurt his team is going to get up the butt of the official. Kevin O'Connell, too. Well, Kevin O'Connell was stoic. Yeah, it's because he didn't feel like his team was boned by a complete fabrication of an offside call. 608-321-1670. By the way, Jesse Temple in about 10 minutes. But back to your Packers phone calls. Wisco Sports Show. Who's this?
I got Tom in Mount Horeb.
Tom in Mount Horeb. How's the Mount this evening?
It's beautiful. It's not snowing, so we're all good.
Well, that's good to hear. Just a little bit this morning, the perfect amount. Well, what's going on?
So here's kind of my thoughts. I think the frustration lies this year that they didn't – last year, if you remember, it seemed to me every game they got just a little better and they were ascending nicely. This year, I don't think they had that this year. They didn't quite ascend, and a lot of pre-snap errors. Was it two errors this late in the year, or two penalties this late in the year for illegal formation, 12 guys in the huddle? I just think, if they're not carrying the details, those details, it seems like a 5-yard penalty during regular season is different than a 5-yard penalty in the playoffs. Just a couple thoughts.
So I don't know. Last year is just so different from this year. I appreciate the call. Thanks for listening in Mount Horeb, Tom. Last year was just so different. That team was going to get better. There was so much more room for growth with that team last year because they started at ground zero. Wide receivers who had never played in the NFL before, a quarterback that had never started in the NFL before. Like, of course, they were going to get better. They had more room to grow, and they were going to grow at a faster rate. This year, I think they've improved as the year's gone along. Season's also been marred with 2 injuries to Jordan Love, which kind of funked up his rhythm and his mobility, which has impacted his effectiveness against the rush and the blitz, especially. I don't know. I want to compare last year and this year, but there are also a lot of differences in last year and this year. And that's why I'm saying, look, they've won 3 more games, or they're going to win 3 more games. The division around them got better. But that's kind of out of their control. So they got 3 games better than last year. Okay, well, they got 3rd in the division. Okay, well, the Vikings and the Lions are awesome. And they held on in close games and close wins over the Packers. 608-321-1670. Wisco Sports Show. Who's this?
Hey, Grant.
Howdy, Mike.
I'm riding my bike.
Oh, well, be safe. I don't want to hear you go down.
No.
Okay.
I'm coming across the bridge here where I had my heart attack 4.5 years ago. So
what the heck? And you keep going back to the spot?
Yeah, over and over. So
good for you.
It's almost sunset. So, hey, on whether it's been a successful season so far or not.
Yeah.
Yeah, technically, record-wise, yes, it has been. But some of these losses, I guess, just the way they happened, they were self-inflicted losses, and I think that's what overshadows everybody's feeling here is that, you know, they just can't seem to shake this dark cloud of mistakes and get a win when they really need it.
How much of
And
that
with
do you
Matt
ascribe to their youth? Do you ever look at some of those mistakes and do you say, well, they're a young team? Because I think sometimes that's true, but sometimes it's not.
I think some of the, you know, I listened to you guys this morning and all that, and the youth argument, I think they're beyond that now. They've played, most of all these starters now have played 2 full seasons in the NFL. They play football their whole lives. I know it's a different venue, you're in a big league market now, but I think the youth thing now is kind of secondhand, at least in my opinion.
Yeah, and I think even though some of these players are younger, like Dobbs, okay, he's in his 3rd year, but he's played as much as any 3rd-year wide receiver could possibly play because he was thrown in as a rookie. It's not like he's just starting to figure it out. So even some of their younger players, and like Josh Jacobs made a mistake. He had that fumble on the first drive. He's a veteran, right? So he's not young. That's not an issue of youth.
Yeah, and they just seemed to kind of go into a shell after that. I don't know if LaFleur was having flashbacks of some of those fumbles in past big games, but and you know, as far as LaFleur, if he is changing and he is too uptight, and you know, people say, well, I want to see him get emotional. That's good, yeah, but if his players aren't used to that and he's not being consistent, and they see him getting all uptight, maybe not so much it bothers them with the rest on the field, but maybe in the locker room, maybe at practice,
sure,
he's kind of coming across a little differently, and in turn making them play tight. And maybe that's some of Jordan Love's problems. You know, maybe he's feeling like he's getting mixed messages from LaFleur, or who knows.
Well, now it's funny, Mike, and enjoy a great bike ride. Have a happy new year. It's funny because for weeks it's like Matt LaFleur needs to curb Jordan Love's interception problem, needs to corral him in, needs to coach him. And after this week, it's like, well, they need to let Jordan Love be Jordan Love. It's like, oh God, you know, we're chasing our tail a little bit. It's a fun offense to watch. It's a fun mix, right? We talked about this last week. It's a lot of power running game with lots of different looks out of the shotgun, under center, with sweeps and motions and orbits and lots of different things. So it's a really effective running game. And I think I saw the graphic during the Vikings game. They run the ball in the first half like 53% rate. Like they are the most run heavy team in scripted plays and first half drives than just about any other team in the NFL. And their passing game isn't dinking and dunking, where like a lot of teams, like I think of Jimmy G, right? With the Niners, it was a lot of running on those teams, but also like when Jimmy G had to throw, it was very limited. This is the opposite. A lot of running with the Packers, really a rate higher than no other teams in the NFL. But when they throw, like it's pushing the ball down the field. The problem is when Jordan Love has a really bad day passing the ball down the field like he did on Sunday, and the team's behind, well, the two biggest parts of their offense, rushing, you can't rush because you're down. And if the deep passing game isn't working, and it's going to get harder to push the ball down the field when you're losing because the pass rush can come after you more when they don't have to worry about the running game. And when you have a lead, your pass rusher can pin their ears back. Like it's a really, really difficult mix. And I think you saw that really come to a head in the third quarter, which I thought was their worst quarter by far. Everyone was like, well, they started slow. I thought they started fine. It just didn't convert into points. And then the third quarter, it just all came melting down. It's an interesting mix that Matt LaFleur and his staff needs to find the balance of letting Jordan Love be Jordan Love, but still supporting him with a running game because that's the best part of their offense. It's a balance. And Matt LaFleur, like Mike Tomlin said a couple of weeks ago, that's why I'm highly compensated. That's why these head coaches are compensated, and that's why they work a lot of hours, because this is the equation that they got to try to figure out. And Matt LaFleur has a very unique offense with unique personnel, trying to find a way to make it all work and to get the most and the best out of everybody. Let's take a break. We'll be back in a couple of minutes. We're going to talk to Jesse Temple of The Athletic, and then we'll have a little time at the end of the show. We should be taking our break before 5:50, so we'll have time at the end to kind of any closing thoughts. This isn't going to take us to the end of the show. Let's break a little bit earlier than we otherwise would, and we'll talk with Jesse Temple, college football, next.
This is the Wisco Sports Show with Grant Bills on the Wisconsin Sports Zone Radio Network.
The Wisco Sports Show will resume in 5 minutes. The Wisco Sports Show will resume in 4 minutes. The Wisco Sports Show will resume in 3 minutes. The Wisco Sports Show will resume in 2 minutes. The Wisco Sports Show will resume in 1 minute. The Wisco Sports Show will resume in 30 seconds.
The Wisco Sports Show. Gonna get to Jesse Temple here in but a moment. Off tomorrow, best of show. We'll be back on Thursday to talk college football and get ready for Packers Bears and talk more about kind of how we feel about this Packers season as a whole. Because when I texted Bill this morning, I'll actually read you the text. This is kind of how I arrived on tonight's topic of like, hey, do you guys feel like this Packers season has been a success? I know it hasn't been perfect. Very few seasons are. Feels like this has been a nice step in the growth and the maturity of this team. I texted Bill this morning, and I don't often tell Bill like topics that we should hit. I said, it's funny to think that if you told someone before the season that the team would go 11-5, probably finish 12-5, they would have been very happy. Yet they are 11-5, and most Packers fans seem unhappy this week. Let's ask today, has the season been a success so far, or has the season been a disappointment so far? That's kind of what we've been talking about tonight. Let's take a call, and then we'll get to Jesse Temple. 608-321-1670. Wisco Sports Show. Who's this?
Eric on I-90.
Eric, I knew. Why didn't I guess? Anytime I guess that it's you, it's not. And anytime I think it's you and I don't guess, it's never you. So I'll just stop. What's going on? Happy New Year's Eve.
Keep them guessing, Grant. That's what you got to always do. Keep them guessing.
Keep them in the dark.
Happy New Year.
Happy New Year, Eric. What do you make of all this? Yeah, we've been talking about your coach a little bit, Kevin O'Connell. Everyone's comparing Matt LaFleur this week. It's like Matt LaFleur lost his cool. Kevin O'Connell was like steady Eddie. I'm like, well, yeah, but Kevin O'Connell, if he felt like his team got boned by a call, he'd probably climb up the ref's butt too. Like, I don't know. Would you disagree?
Well, I think I don't disagree, and he would do that. And, that's right. Winning cures that. I mean, it's all right. It's just about winning. And you guys are just the Packers. This is just a game. This is just one game. You could have what? 4 more games. You could have. You could. It's possible.
If you simulate this Packers season a couple of times, I think it shakes out. I think their record is correct. But I think more often than not, the result of the simulation would come out. The Packers would lose a game to like the Jags or the Texans or somebody, but then they would have picked up another win. Like, I think it's a little fluky. They're 0-5 versus Philly, Detroit, Minnesota. I'm not saying that they should have won all those games, but I think if you play the season a couple times, they would have won one of those games. Does that make sense? You're a man of science. You get that.
Yes. And, you're clearly in, your expectation currency. You guys put a lot in. You took second mortgages on the house, at the beginning of the year, right?
Mm-hmm.
I'm on house money.
Oh, yeah.
I'm on house money as a This isn't even supposed to be happening. I mean, we got like a coach of the year candidate.
Sam Darnold, if they win this weekend, why shouldn't Sam Darnold be MVP? Let me ask you that, Eric.
Yeah, why not? And who would have believed it? I didn't even know the guy's name at the beginning of the season.
Yeah, didn't you call him Donald?
He corrected me one time. Yeah, I called him something. And so, I just think that it's just one game. And of course, you had to lose to your rival. It never goes. It just never feels good that week. You get down here and beat up the Bears. And then everybody's just going to see what happens. I don't know if Minnesota can beat Detroit. I really don't. But I think they can give them a good game.
Yeah. I think Minnesota's going to.
And then look at how this could pan out, Grant. We beat Detroit, get the number 1 seed.
Mm-hmm.
Green Bay goes to Philly. Or who? And then the next game is against the Vikings.
Yeah, exactly.
So you've got a chance. And it's really hard to beat a team 3 times in a row.
In theory, yes. And I think at the very least, and Eric, I got to run because I got to get to Jesse. Have a great New Year. We'll talk soon. I think at the very least, if the Packers were able to go beat Philly, then they can pitch that, well, no one expects us to go to US Bank and win. We've already lost to this team twice. Let's just go rip it. And the Vikings have been resting for a week. Maybe you get them a little, you get that team a little rusty. Like, the path is there. I think this Packers team's a little tight. You know what fixes that? Going on the road in the playoffs with the message of, well, no one thinks we're going to win this game. Could work. I see the shape of it. Best of luck to your team this weekend, Eric. Happy New Year. Jesse Temple, The Athletic. Let's talk Badgers. Jesse Temple is here from The Athletic. You can hear him on The Camp with Zach. It's my favorite Badgers podcast. I was listening on my drive in today. Now, Jesse, I don't know if you're sick and tired of this Xavier Lucas story yet. I'm just interested because we don't really know anything. We know that something happened where Wisconsin's like, no, we don't want to release you to the portal. We have an axe to grind here. Something held up that process. There's just so much we don't know. And I think that's why this story is still catching the attention. 24 players transferred, but something was different about this one. So what's it been like to try to dig up information from Wisconsin, from Lucas's camp, from maybe other schools? What's this story been like? This is a very new age college football story.
Extremely challenging to try to gain information. Wisconsin has no interest in discussing this publicly. I reached out to Rob Master, who's the executive chair of the Varsity Collective, and he declined comment. And people in Xavier's camp have not been willing to respond to any comments or calls, other than his dad, who is a little bit removed from the situation. I think this seems like a spot where Xavier and his mom are probably handling this or leading it in the direction that it's going. But I think that the ultimate resolution is going to be Xavier's going to move on here. There's no way that at this point he would come back. He doesn't want to come back. And it's a matter of what actually happened. I think that the understanding is that something was signed relating to NIL. I do know that a lot of the returning players were presented with contracts in early December after the season. But before they all broke for break, asked to sign them. Now, I don't know the contents of what those contracts were and the various price points, but it would seem that the reason this has been held up is because of whatever was signed. And that seems to be what has been different about this situation.
Well, and there's no information, to your point, that's been shared publicly or with reporters who have been asking from UW or from Lucas's camp. Now, let's focus more on the UW part. I had a couple of people on Twitter, talking with listeners about this sort of thing, and someone made the point. It's like, we deserve to know on some level if I'm a donor or if I'm a season ticket holder. I on some level should know kind of what's going on behind the scenes. But the reason that none of this is out is there's no guardrails on any of this, Jesse. There's no rules. There's no lay of the land. Each school is going about this differently. There's no structure. So how do we get to a point where there's more structure, where this doesn't just feel like chaos? Are we ever going to get there? I know we keep saying, well, they'll install this. And are we ever, or is this just new college football and this is the way that it's going to stay, basically a mess?
The only thing I can think of is it's some type of definitive contract situation. But honestly, I don't even know what that looks like. I don't know how you can lock somebody in for 2 years. You can't lock them in for longer. It feels like everything is just a year-to-year situation. I know Greg Gard has talked about this on the basketball side. That feels like where we are in football. I think the frustrating thing from a reporting perspective, and I think from the fan perspective as well, is that there's no transparency. No one has to provide any information. This is not like the NFL where the contracts are out there, or even Luke Fickell or a head coach where you're working at a public university. And so therefore, if you file a public records request, that information must be made available. This stuff hasn't been through the schools. Now, I do know there's a revenue sharing model that's coming this next school year. And maybe that means that some of this information will be more public, because previously it's been handled through the collective, which obviously it doesn't have to provide that type of information other than filing a tax return, which really doesn't tell you very much and isn't even accurate to where you are now, since it was filed several months ago. So it's been very challenging to try to figure out everything that's happening on the NIL landscape.
It is, and I just don't know where we go next. I was talking with Zach a little bit yesterday when he was in the studio, and I'm like, what do you make of all this? He's like, I don't know. I'm tired. Like, you're just pulling your hair out, right? Because nobody knows anything. No one's compelled to share anything because there's no structure. There's no formats. There's no, consistent lines of communication about any of this. It'll be interesting to see where this ends. Is Wisconsin's endgame recouping some money? Is that probably what this is? Because to your point, Xavier Lucas isn't coming back.
I would imagine that's what the holdup has been, and holding someone accountable for what it is that they signed. Now, again, the argument has been, 23, 25 people have headed to the portal. What's different about this situation? And if there is something different, then you would assume that it is something was signed before he went home, and maybe these other guys who were going to enter the portal, I don't know if they didn't sign it. And that's the other thing is I don't know how much money it was. I don't know if it's already been presented and provided, or if it was just something for down the line. There's so many unknown questions here, but ultimately the end result has to be that he's going to get his release at some point, because are you really going to hold him in limbo where he's got to wait until the spring portal window when he's not going to come back here and play football very clearly? And maybe some of it was whether it had to do with tampering and another school trying to get him. There's a lot of factors at play here, but the end result here has to be that they're going to part ways and Xavier's going to be able to move on at some point.
And I'm sure you're probably sick of talking about this. And there are some other things. I want to talk about the conversations you had with both transfer quarterbacks, O'Neill and Edwards Jr., who came in, both really good conversations. I want to touch on that. But first on the defense, before we get there, What was more jarring to you so far this offseason? We got a lot of offseason left, but they lost some defensive front players, mostly to Illinois. Does that concern you more, or is it more the losses of a lot of talented players on the back end? Like, they don't have much in the secondary right now.
I mean, I'd probably go with cornerbacks. And good for Brett Bielema for taking all the people that Wisconsin either didn't want or those guys were ready to move on. And I think Zach and I were talking about this on the camp, but it would be sort of hilarious if Bielema turned Illinois' front into this astonishingly good defense with players from Wisconsin who maybe didn't live up to expectations. Now, the James Thompson Jr. one is a little bit different. He tore his pec muscle and didn't get to play this year. But Wisconsin has been able to replenish bodies on the D-line. That was the number one priority, I guess, other than quarterback. But they've gotten 4 defensive linemen so far, so I think they're okay there. To me, it's cornerback, and really it was the young talent that they lost. That felt like it was going to be the backbone of the future here. Guys like Amari Snowden, Jonas Duclona, and it's safety too. Losing a guy like Braden Moore, who was a 4-star prospect. But if we're just going to focus on one specific position, losing 4 cornerbacks, including Xavier Lucas, is far from ideal. You don't have Nazir Fortune anymore. And so they need to figure it out. Right now, they've added 1 guy from the portal, but they're continuing to offer, and I imagine they're going to bring in 1 or 2 more corners before it's all said and done from the portal.
Well, and it's funny. I don't know if it was you or Zach that mentioned this on the camp that I listened to earlier today. It's like there's like 2,500 players in the transfer portal. So you got to find bodies at one position or another. It's not like the Badgers are in a unique situation. Maybe they lost more players than you'd like to see go, but there are players moving all over the place. You had conversations, The Athletic, with both quarterbacks that the Badgers have added so far, O'Neal and Billy Edwards Jr., who came from Maryland, and he is the presumed starter. Now, I want people to go read the stories, so I don't want you to give us all the goods. But, Jesse, you know the sport really well. I'm sure you kind of had an understanding and a concept of what Wisconsin told Billy Edwards Jr., what was he expecting compensation. What surprised you? What maybe caught you off guard a little bit when you talked to Billy Edwards Jr. and his process to decide to come here to Wisconsin?
Well, one of the things he talked about is he had a list of like 7 schools that he was interested in visiting, and that includes Wisconsin, Virginia, Michigan, Louisville, Indiana, Kentucky, Missouri. And he also knew there was no way he was going to be able to visit all of them because of the tight window as this happens. It's a domino effect. If Wisconsin gets a quarterback, then he's out of luck, and he's got to move on down the list. And so he ended up visiting Wisconsin. He's from Virginia. He made the 2-hour drive to the University of Virginia, and Virginia ended up getting a quarterback, and he picked Wisconsin. I mean, I don't know if there's a ton that necessarily surprised me. It's a great opportunity to come in with 1 year left and be the starting quarterback when you've already got starting experience in the Big Ten at Maryland. He talked about how Luke Fickell's vision for him was developing as a leader, and Jeff Grimes' vision was, here's how you fit into this offense, and he feels like he'll be challenged in a different way. He's kind of more accustomed to an air raid type of system, but feels like what Grimes offers will help him develop as a quarterback. So, I think my takeaway was how expansive he is in terms of his responses. Very rarely do I remember talking to somebody who would just give you hundreds of words worth of answers when you ask a question, but that's because he wants to have a future in coaching. And so if I'm looking at it just from the perspective of a reporter, hopefully he'll be someone who will be good to talk to for this next season, assuming he's healthy enough to play, which we've seen the last 2 years is not a guarantee.
Yeah, well, that's the thing. If he's just able to start every game, that'll be an improvement from what they've had between Mordecai and Van Dyke last year. Right? Part of the problem is just these guys haven't been healthy. They've brought in Billy Edwards Jr. type players, and they haven't been able to start in all these games. So do we have any inkling of who's going to be this quarterback's coach? I know they got their OC and Jeff Grimes, but these quarterbacks have transferred in, and they're still trying to figure that out, right?
I do wonder if it's going to be someone who's on a team that's been involved in the postseason and they just didn't want to pry him away, maybe a playoff team. It's hard to say, but certainly, I mean, the window has already passed in terms of when the job was posted, and I'm sure Luke Fickell has his guy, and at some point here in the next few weeks, we'll know. So, yeah, and that's kind of where it stands. I've certainly heard a name or two, but we'll see how it all shakes out. I do think that, Luke talked about this in an interview earlier this month, the value that he sees in having a quarterback coach specifically for that room, because he felt like Phil Longo's had success as both an offensive coordinator and a quarterback coach, but there's only so much time in a day, and you can't spend it all with the quarterback if you've got a game plan and work with all the other position groups. So he thinks it will help with the growth and development of the room.
And lastly, safeties coach, Jack Cooper, they promoted him. I don't want to speak out of turn, but based on what I've read and what I've heard from you guys, like all those players in the secondary haven't exactly been psyched about their coaches. the last couple of years. I don't know that every player's been thrilled with the coaches on the back end. So what does Jack Cooper bring to the table? What should we know about this guy?
I mean, he's a young guy. I think the American Football Coaches Association had him as like one of the 35 under 35-year-old coaches, Leadership Institute. Like he was selected to participate in that. So he's just kind of I guess for lack of a better way to put it, a rising star in this sport. He was previously an assistant defensive backs coach because now you don't have a limit on the number of people that can work with the players on the field. So at least it's good that he's got familiarity with these guys. And the Alex Grinch thing, who was the previous safety coach, it sort of always felt like he was going to move on to be a defensive coordinator, just because the Wisconsin thing was kind of a stopgap. He lost his job at USC, needed a place to work. This was a good stop, and now they've got Cooper. And I think the hope for Wisconsin will be that he'll stick around for a little while, and there's no guarantees in that. But Wisconsin is now on to its fourth safeties coach in as many years, because in 2022 it was obviously Jim Leonard, and then you had Colin Hitchler, who went to Alabama, Alex Grinch, and now Jack Cooper. And that's just not great in terms of trying to develop people and build chemistry.
Well, and they used to they had a run of defensive coordinators where guys would develop for a couple of years and then take that next step. And I think at assistant coach and at coordinator, that's what you want. You want these young, talented individuals who are on their way up, not necessarily guys who are, making sideways moves or, taking a downgraded role from a higher role that they've had. I know you always, anytime I bring up anything else around college football, Jesse, you tell me, I cover the Badgers, and that's true. Is there anything interesting with bowls or with college football playoff games that may or may not relate to the Badgers that you're interested in watching this week, or you have been watching so far through bowl season?
I'd say the Ohio State-Oregon game. I mean, it was one of the games of the season. We knew going into the year that was going to be a matchup of two teams that very well could meet once again in the playoffs. And so I want to see what happens there, because Oregon is unbeaten. I think they've been truly remarkable this season to switch conferences, go from the Pac-12 to the Big Ten, go undefeated, win the league championship. And then now they've got to play an Ohio State team that I think, certainly from Ryan Day's perspective, he's got a lot to prove. It's funny because he's taken so much heat, and understandably so, for consistently losing to Michigan. And yet here Ohio State is a few games away from claiming a national championship. So I just think that one is going to be fascinating.
Do you think if Oregon loses, there will be folks in media who are like, well, Oregon was the best team and they got a rough draw, and we're going to feel like somehow this new playoff structure did a disservice to the team that was probably the best team all along?
Nope.
I don't think so?
I mean, interesting. I don't. Look, if you could say, they shouldn't have played Ohio State this round, well, they would have played them in the next round, or a team that's just as good in the next round. I mean, this is the college football playoffs, man. In the first round, you can say there are some matchups that maybe are a little lopsided just because of the structure that they have in place here. But at this time, it's just like the NCAA tournament. You get to the Sweet 16, Elite 8, or whatever. Those are really good teams. So no, I don't have an issue with who they have to play.
You got to beat the best if you want to be a national championship one way or another, if you want to be a national championship team. What can we watch for at The Athletic in the coming weeks, in the beginning of 2025?
Yeah, so I have a story running Wednesday morning on who I think may be the most compelling transfer portal addition for Wisconsin this entire offseason. His name is Matt Young. Went from Division III Bethel University in Minnesota to signing with Wisconsin, almost unheard of. And a guy that entered the portal thinking maybe there's an FCS school out there who will take a chance on me. Got like 6 scholarship offers within minutes of entering the portal. And he's a Neenah, Wisconsin kid. So really special opportunity for him. And the backstory is just fascinating. It's the best safety in Division III this past year, an All-American. So there's that. Several other stories coming. Finally, when the dust settles on the portal, hopefully projecting the 2 deep and where things stand for Wisconsin.
Yeah, and I enjoy Division III football, so I look forward to reading that tomorrow. Jesse, thank you. I appreciate it. Have a good New Year.
Thanks, Grant. Talk soon.
This is the Wisco Sports Show with Grant Bills on the Wisconsin Sports Zone Radio Network.
The Wisco Sports Show will resume in 3 minutes. The Wisco Sports Show will resume in 2 minutes. The Wisco Sports Show will resume in 1 minute. The Wisco Sports Show will resume in 30 seconds.
Last minute or so, happy New Year's Eve. Man, I listen to this song and I love doing sports radio. It's so cool. But I occasionally listen to like old time radio. And if I would have been born in 1920, I would have been the cat's ass. Before the invention of the TV, before the video killed the radio star. But good conversations about the Packers today. Good conversation with Jesse Temple. Appreciate his coverage, always. And we'll talk to him again next week. Bowl season, I really enjoyed it today. I enjoyed the Cheez-It Citrus Bowl. Looking forward to more games tomorrow. I will be off tomorrow. A true best of, though. Some segments and some interviews going all the way back to Radio Row, some Brewers stuff. So an actual legitimate like best of show tomorrow. I didn't just mail it in and, pick some random stuff over the last couple of weeks. Not that I would ever do that. But intentional, some of my favorite interviews and topics and things from the last year or so. So you'll hear that tomorrow. I will be back on Thursday. Have a very, very, very Merry New Year. And I will talk to you next year. Thanks for listening.